things that make me a terrible, terrible, terrible public speaker. 1, I have an absolutely terrible memory. 2, I'm a geek, so I try and fit loads of information into a short space of time. And thirdly, I'm bald and shave my head, which make me absolute hell for lighting guys. What I'm going to be talking about today is Emergence, but we'll go through what I had a nicely crafted intro, which I've had to deviate from since I've been throwing off all of my timing. But Arthur C. Clarke, that great father of modern, well, satellite everything, pretty much everything you can trace back to Clarke, said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I would like to make a slight addition to that and say that any sufficiently complex system is you can't tell the difference between it and magic. And just as a little bit of an example, take the world's favorite magic trick, the rabbit from the hat. You can see the hat, you can see the magician, you can see the little sleight of hand tricks. You don't necessarily know how he does it, and you don't know how the rabbit got from like under the floor or up the sleeve or in the elbow into the hat. Likewise, there are some things we really just don't understand, like why these colonies of bacteria can absolutely perfectly model the Tokyo transport system. Like why traffic jams happen on open roads whenever there's nothing in the way, and it's not just caused by accidents and rubbernecking. Or why the US economy lost approximately $1 trillion in 6 minutes. So we'll come back to that in a while. But these are just some of the examples of some of what are called emergent behaviors or emergent properties. And now I'm going to have to consult my notes. So basically, long story short, simple rules get complicated. But in terms of a little bit about me, I have background in Queen's, and my research is with Queen's University Belfast. That's the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, and I've recently just moved my research to the University of Liverpool, having to bid a fond farewell to Northern Ireland and all of its lovely people, and they keep dragging me back. But whenever Davey gave me a heads up about wanting to get me into TEDx a long time ago, and whenever I started talking to a few people about it and frankly bricking it a bit, I had a very, very good friend give me a good piece of advice, which was find one message that you want to put across and stick to it and use it as a guiding light for your audience to keep track of you rambling. So in terms of that message, it's accept emergence. So not promote, not foster, not push, not encourage, accept. Before we go on to the meat of it, what do you actually do, Andrew? Why do you speak from any form of point? My research is actually to do with emergent behaviors in not quite invented yet smart submarines for defense and environmental applications. So part of that work is doing lots and lots of simulations with lots and lots of these little virtual actors playing together and with relatively simple rules. And I'm always amazed at how these simple rules and these simple collaborative behaviors end up creating some amazing and completely unexpected responses. And unfortunately, my attitude to that sometimes pisses off my supervisor. But it gets the job done. So what on earth is emergence? What on earth is something that's complicated? What is something that's complex? Well, one of the things that I found whenever I was putting this together was that I was saying emergence a lot, emergence. And I said complex systems, complex. What on earth is a complex system? And what's the difference between that and something that's complicated? Well, the way that academics and engineers think about an emergent property is it's the unforeseen consequences of a complex system. What does that mean? What on earth is a complex system? We'll come to that in a second. Can anyone have a guess whether this is complicated? Complex. Why did you say that? Right, okay, looks like it, right? Our version of something that's complicated is something that relies on an awful lot of variables, effectively, or something that's difficult to pin down. That look complicated or complex? Or can anyone tell where I'm going with this? The previous one was the complicated one, so what one's this one? The complex one. This is where you're looking at relatively simple things collaborating together, interacting together, where one thing's hitting off the other thing, and this is just 4 circles that leave a pen. That's about it. Everyone had a spirograph. And this is an example of a complex system that creates these kind of emergent properties, in this case a fractal property. So to bring it all down into something really simple. Taxes are complicated. Planning the seating for a wedding reception is complex. I think that if anyone has ever had to deal with a mother-in-law trying to get involved in the seating plan, they know this is already the case. Right, so in terms of my observations from my experience in defense research, STEM outreach, community development, and some of the professional work that I've been doing, the overarching thing that I find is that whenever you give people the opportunity and the sort of openness to play around, they create some absolutely fantastic things that you never would have designed. I would love the Arts Council to come up with something like this. It would have cost about £3 million, but still. But I'm sorry to any Arts Council people, but from an outsider's perspective, that's what, just look at the balls of the fall, seriously. But at the same time, those same kind of simple things interacting together can sometimes kick you in the soft bits through no fault of anyone's own. I had a first draft of this speech that went into great detail about loads of the reason why these simple rules work and all of those different things. But I kind of realized fairly quickly that that's not really what you guys are here for. But so we'll do a little quick summary of what it was. Anyone know whose house this is? I'd be impressed. It's Barbra Streisand's. In 2003, the US Oceanographic Survey people were doing a survey along the California coast to assess erosion. And they took this picture along with a couple of thousand others. Barbra Streisand took them to court for a couple of $1 million because of an invasion of privacy. The fact that she put that case forward then meant that the picture was the most viewed thing on the internet for a while. For somebody who was trying to hide her privacy, the worst irony about this is that is now called the Streisand effect. Ants. One of the greatest examples of emergent behaviors in anything. Which one of these is the laser? This one on the right, left, right, top, is an ant colony slowly killing itself by driving around and around in circles. So, sounds like a big, terrible thing, but it is just a case of simple rules gone wrong. Those same simple rules are applied to these guys, where they're actually the same, they're fire ants. These guys will automatically form a raft together with themselves and will cross streams and cross rivers to continue to spread the colony along. And in terms of something that's a little bit harder, I suppose, Giant's Causeway is actually a brilliant example of emergence as well, because that telltale pattern of the hexagons, heptagons, etc., is actually simply an emergent property of one of the factors of basalt, which is that in terms of the vertical piles of basalt crystals, those are actually quite flexible. And then the sort of sideways connections are very, very brittle. So whenever you have the lava starting to cool down and starting to shrink, as hot things have a habit of doing, it causes these vertical cracks and that distinctive shape, and because of the crystal shape, it makes them sort of massive hexagons. So, and it also means that that vertical strength is also one of the reasons why, to this day, they still support most of the North Coast economy and American tourists. And back to this one, right? 6 minutes. 6 minutes it took to nearly wipe $1 trillion off the US financial markets. And it was all triggered by one hedge fund dropping a couple of million of a commodity. Then a load of high-frequency trading algorithms kind of bounced around themselves and said, oh, right, no, I'll sell now, sell now, sell now. So within 6 minutes, and it was just after lunch, so we can all agree with a little bit of sort of bloatedness after that, they eventually had to pull the plug on the entire network for 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Funnily enough, it was CME, if anyone knows that they've sort of recently moved in here, so you can thank them for saving the economy. The funny thing is that that's a disaster of emergence. But the funny thing is that this massive spike that came in, that was also the same high-frequency trading algorithms bringing the economy back up in the most liquid way possible. So, now I definitely have to compare my notes. Anyone name the movie while I'm thinking? Nobody? That's it. Everyone picked it up from the beginning. Where have I gone? I have gone. I have completely lost myself. That's brilliant. Yes, okay, my message. Big message. I'm supposed to stick to it, not you. So what's the whole point of this? I'm trying to make one point and make it very, very badly, accept emergence. So you need to be able to roll with the punches, and you need to be able to accept things going wrong, and you need to stop trying sometimes. Sometimes you just need to take a step back and say, look, I don't need to do anything. Inaction is a completely valid action. You don't just have to act for the sake of acting, and quite often that's going to make things worse. So in an effort to try and espouse how good things happen if you leave things alone, I'm going to tell a little story about the story of Farset Labs. Yep, that one was the right slide. Thank goodness for that. So about 2 years ago, I came back from a conference and met some of my sort of heroes and had been asking them, so where do you do these things? They turned around and said, hackerspace. I turned around and said, what the hell is a hackerspace? And they explained to me, right, open innovation, all of these lovely buzzwords that you get. And this, I actually have a note down to remind me that I suspect, Davey, this was the reason why you asked me rather than any of my professional and academic work. It was this one little accidental, right place, right time, wrong amount of alcohol, and turning around and saying, yeah, sure, I'll do that. But this wasn't a case of magic. This wasn't a case of us sitting down and planning it all out. It was a case of literally meeting an ad hoc group of people meeting in the back room of the parlor every couple of weeks, and bringing together not just classical technologists, electronics guys, computer science guys, all of the usual suspects, but also bringing on marketers, designers, artists, musicians, authors, and throwing those people together into a melting pot. And, run for geeks, by geeks, and by geek I mean anyone interested in anything pretty much, which, hands up who feel that they qualify? It's TEDx, so that was kind of a foregone conclusion. Now, my previous version of this little blurb that I more or less pulled from the blog with a little bit of ad hoc add-in originally said that we were almost completely unsupported. I have to, this is going to be the first public announcement of it, but we recently secured a small sponsorship deal with Intel. So they're coming on as corporate members and they're getting involved in the community and all of that lovely stuff. Missed that one. So Intel Inside, had to find that. It was brilliant. But they join our other corporate partners, EvoRack, Tybus, and Weaver's Court. And even though we're not employing people yet, and we're not some kind of job factory creating things, we discovered that as soon as you put these people into a room together, they start bitching. And the primary bitch that comes out is, but I don't want to go down the normal career path. I don't want to go and get a degree in subject X and then go and get a placement in subject X and then go and interview for jobs in subject X and then get entry-level job and sit until I end up being a middle manager. And then I can do what I actually wanted to do. So after they're done bitching, they say, what could we do differently? What could we do to try and change that up? And it's one of my favorite things in the world to watch is these people from completely different backgrounds, completely different networks, completely different cultures, just bouncing ideas around. And sometimes they end up being ridiculous, and sometimes they end up being, I actually had to tell people off because what they were actually describing was a cruise missile. Seriously, it was very, very close. It was literally, why don't we just have a remote-controlled plane and then we can put some fireworks in it? Just for anyone who doesn't know, we are based in the middle of Sandy Row, beside the railway. But yes, seeing this collaboration between people is one of the most amazing things that I've been able to be part of. And one thing that I will say is that Farset Labs is not a building. Farset Labs is not a company. It's a community. It's the people. I mean, you could the cruise missile could go off in production, and apart from a few lost bodies, we wouldn't be too worried about the building. We can move on because we've created this brilliant network of people. This was a democratically suggested image to describe my feelings on my upcoming departure from Farset Labs. Whenever somebody asks me, would you like to go back and do it again? If anyone doesn't know, this is an escape from a drug hell. So yeah, Farset Labs is not necessarily a model that needs to be copied by everybody, but some of the philosophy, I think, can be transmitted across. We've created this culture of collaboration and sharing between what are going to be the next generation thought leaders. But there's a problem. We don't have an impact assessment. We can't. It's going to take 5 years for the impact of Farset Labs to be felt at all. It's going to take that long to get the attitudinal changes through, the changes in funding, the changes in people's lives, the changes in technology, and just get them up to a certain level. But I'm telling you today that in 5 years' time, there is going to be a network of secret dissidents all started up from Farset Labs and who all know each other and are going to do backroom deals that you didn't see coming. And they're pulling from a range of experiences, a range of backgrounds, a range of classes, a range of different schools, completely different environments. And they all know how to talk and how to talk to each other and how to share ideas. And the biggest problem that I find is that Farset Labs was a very, very accepting environment. You could walk in with anything, any idea that you liked, and it'd be embraced. It'd be accepted. And then something happened, you blew up something. We actually did, on one of the first occasions, we blew up a pristine, I was so glad to see it up and running again, a pristine, original BBC Micro that had been in somebody's garage for like years. And within 5 minutes, it had gone up in smoke. Literally. Disturbing day. We did actually have people in, which was a little bit worrying. We didn't have to send out the fire extinguishers, but great loss. But that kind of attitude of, screw it, why not, we'll try it, just doesn't seem to exist. We've got the father stopping a little bit of the wobbly knee. I'm a terrible one for that. I saw this online and thought, this is a perfect description of Northern Ireland, or at least the Northern Ireland sort of technical economy. People factory. It's you go on your path, you go round a loop, you go through a few wee checkpoints, just to make sure you're okay, you're not a reject yet, and you eventually get through to, you'll notice that there's no end to this maze. And it just continues on, continues on, continues on. You've got to make sure that all of your ideas are forecast against, projected, and politically desensitized, which is a brilliant thing in this part of the world. If you take everything politically desensitized, you end up with no original ideas. One of the things that I had as sort of a thought experiment, going back and looking at the origins of Farset Labs, was what would happen if you got a load of these replicants? Or, no, I won't say anything bad about any particular company. What about if you had a group of people with perfect grades, perfect backgrounds, that had been top of every class that had ever been part of, that were part of, orthogonal complementary groups? You had somebody in technology, somebody in business, somebody in finance, somebody in management, somebody in press and PR, and put them all together and see what happens. A perfect dynamic team of all of those lovely target matching things. And it would have been as boring as cold porridge, and it would probably have been disastrous. Because you need to have a little bit of madness. Can't remember what the next slide is, actually. Very demure one. That's good. Sometimes you just have to wait around for the right things to fall into place. Sometimes you just have to accept that entry-level employee who says, boss, I think I might have an idea. Or as I was speaking to somebody earlier who this guy had discovered, or this manager had discovered that one of his star employees had just slumped in terms of performance. And it was, sorry, you were one of my best performing. What's happened? What's wrong? What do we need to do to make things better? And the guy just turns around and says, there's a guy in the other department over who is doing exactly the same job as I am. And we're duplicating effort, and I really can't be asked, mate. And it's that kind of vertical sharing and that kind of sharing of ideas, sharing of collaboration, sharing of community that I'm really trying to espouse in general. It was quite interesting that I was reading recently that Edmund Burke, not one of these two, Edmund Burke, the great sort of Dublin-based political thinker and agent provocateur, said something along the lines of, it's been misquoted millions of times over, but all that evil needs to triumph is the inaction of good men. I'd like to kind of modify that a bit and say that if I was going to get a subtitle for this talk, I would say that the road to hell is paved by good intentions. And that sometimes forced goodness, even if it's got all the will in the world, there are unforeseen consequences if you're not taking small, iterative, experimental steps. Having proposals that go 30 years into the future, unless you've got an updating plan, is insane. You need to be able to accept emergences that's coming along. If I had a message, yes, this page is kept intentionally blank. If I had a message for somebody who was trying to do the right thing, to create the innovation economy, to move Northern Ireland away from the shipbuilding and the call centres and everything into a really genuinely innovative economy, I'd say stop trying to help so much. Stop trying to help those small little groups. Stop trying to cherry pick the best people. Stop having the social investment fund that spends 3 years paying consultants and not much else. Stop having entrepreneurship opportunities that only seem to go to the good schools. Stop trying to pick up these people in early stage development, whether that's post-primary or early university, and saying, you're good, I'm going to put you into a pipeline that will pump you out as being a wonderful entrepreneur in 5 years' time. To those people I say, not only are you wasting your time, but you're also missing the bigger opportunity, which is instead of having a small number of really pristine entrepreneurs, thought leaders, whatever you want to call them, there's plenty of buzzwords around it, but you have an entire innovative culture where everyone is sharing ideas. And it was quite funny, actually. I saw this, that if I was going to put together a report card for the Northern Ireland education system, it'd be, needs to apply themselves more and stop worrying about rags on roofs. I think that does pretty much sum it up. But just in terms of one small closing argument, I just like this one because it's pretty. On a personal note, my dad had a fantastic phrase, and it was great actually to hear you speaking earlier about the process of the word of Ubuntu. But he had a brilliant phrase, which was, everyone should live with a certain generosity of spirit. It's not just enough to live well for yourself. You've got to live well, or you've got to live with an outward generosity of spirit. You've got to share your time, share your patience, share your understanding. Instead of reacting whenever someone tries to criticize you, take on board their information and say, you've got different experience from me, I might be able to learn from that. Really, that about sums it up. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for all your time and patience. I've been a terrible speaker, and if anyone's looking for me later, I will probably be at the bar.